You know that feeling where you play a game and it was awesome and you come out of it thinking, man, that was damn good. I appreciate that game. Then you open a browser and you see on Reddit or Rock Paper Shotgun or whatever that there's going to be a sequel. And then you just get this awesome feeling of, yes, I can look forward to something now. Anybody? Okay, it's a bit of a specific thing to relate to, but the point is that I love the feeling of awaiting a new sequel to a game I like. Something about it has always made me giddy. Then, there's the two branching paths of the scenario. I get it, and I'm like, yes, it's incredible! Or I get it, and what the hell is this? What is this shit? Okay, doesn't anyone know that feeling? Oh, whatever, screw it. The point is, bad sequels are terrible. So, what is a sequel? And before you start yelling some obscenities about how nobody doesn't know, I mean in a literal sense, well, they're an iteration of another game, a continuation of sorts, right? There can be a few different ways of presenting this too. There's direct sequels, like in a lot of films, that just get the previous titles in the series and continue where that one finished, like Mass Effect or Banjo Kazooie 1 and 2. Conversely, there are also sequels based in entirely new time, setting and aesthetic. This tends to be more common nowadays, however they serve their purpose well enough. Developers make sequels for a variety of reasons. One of the most obvious would be that the previous title sold really well and got positive reviews. The second is that the fans of the game are openly requesting another game, and though some developers tend to openly go out of their way not to release sequels that are highly requested. Half-Life. Another reason could be that the development team was simply so passionate about the game that making a sequel was really appealing. Whether it be because they thought the original that they made was awful and they believe that they can do this one well, or simply because making sequels makes more money and that money makes the world spin. Sometimes sequels aren't even made by the original developers though, and are created by another team, for one reason or another, but usually for profit. An example of the publisher being the arbitrator in the development of sequels being the old Command & Conquer games, that were originally made by Westwood Studios, but after being bought out by EA and having many long-time Westwood employees leave the team, Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun was forced out by EA's quick deadline that was only achievable with a larger team, causing the game to be unfinished. This to me seems like a sequel that was pushed out by EA just for the money, even if the developers were very unsatisfied with the final product. A sequel will go very well when the developer shows great care about their game, investing time and effort in order to meet the creative vision of the game designers. Most teams will not want to release their game unless it's taken shape to what they believe is the perfect form, much like anything. As far as content is concerned though, the sequel must meet the standard that the previous game set. Most importantly, in my opinion, there needs to be enough new content to drive the game in at least a slightly different direction to its predecessors. If this doesn't happen, then the game will feel staler than the personality of a school librarian. A sequel can turn sour when a game departs way too much from what made the original game good, when the game's core mechanics are peeled back way too much to the extent that some of the simple things are ruined. Or possibly the worst case, when the sequel doesn't add anything to the game whatsoever that it wasn't seen in the predecessor, almost sticking to the original formula completely. Why? Because when we play the original game, depending on how much we like it, we can become fans of the game. Hearing the announcement of a sequel from a fan's point of view is like hearing about how you're going to get a gift soon. Except you pay for it. But mainly when a developer is making a sequel to a well-received game, their demographic is likely to be the fans of the previous title, and some newcomers. If they please the fans, then they're likely to tell their friends that the series is good stuff, and if they get new players from the start, then everybody wins. But if you get a sequel and it's terrible, it feels like something you respected has fallen apart. It's like frustration mixed with disappointment.
What's up, y'all? The samurai is in the Kazooie, yeah!
A really good example of a good sequel would be Majora's Mask, picking up after Ocarina of Time, using just an updated version of the original engine. The game served its purpose as a sequel perfectly. Let me explain. Ocarina of Time had time travel, which branched into various items which were usable at certain times, with the core mechanics being adventure, sword, shield, dungeons, horse, and ocarina. In Majora's Mask, it scrapped time travel and all of its qualms and replaced it with 3 days till the world ends, and a billion masks that were used to solve puzzles. However, it retained the adventure, sword, shield, dungeons, horse, and ocarina mechanics, because they are the base of the game. Does the game feel familiar to Ocarina? Yeah. Does the game feel the same? No. Assassin's Creed's transition from 1 to 2 is a good example as well. The original was a good, interesting, ambitious game, however claimed by many to be an ultimately flawed experience. But Ubisoft knew what to do, and in Assassin's Creed 2, the old mission format of Contract, Scout, Stab was changed, and mission variety was focused on a lot more. The story was a lot more interesting, and had many more turns and general development. Finally, the addition of Ezio was extremely important, as it gave the game a much needable, likable character. Oh yeah, it was in Italy, that was pretty cool. Another interesting example is Metroid Prime's first sequel, which basically straight up kept the old mechanics, then added a whole lot more. There wasn't really a trade-off that I can really think of. The game gave you access to light and dark worlds, an ammo system, and 3 different new beams. It wasn't the best sequel in some respects, and some of the annoying parts of Metroid Prime 1 were still intact, but the point is, the developers fulfilled the purpose of a sequel. When you add new things to a game sequel, it really should feel like that the stuff you add allows it to still feel relevant. And as I said earlier, the sequel shouldn't make too many departures from the original, to the point where it just looks like some sort of barely recognizable reference to another game. If it gets to that point, then slapping the label of another game on the cover and claiming it's a sequel isn't fair, even if the game is great. My personal qualm that matches this problem is the transition from Far Cry 1 to Far Cry 2. I remember, I bought them both on Steam sales together. I played Far Cry 1, and I played a lot. I loved the game. It was so fun having to scour each level looking for good weapons, while simultaneously having a hell of a hard time on the normal difficulty. The game, being fairly linear, had its prowess shown in the unforgiving nature of gameplay and interesting storyline. It was the kind of gameplay that you'd play, and if you made the wrong move, you would be dead. So remembering to check your health and finding health packs was incredibly important, and each segment of the game felt like an achievement to overcome. Then they introduced aliens, which ramped up the difficulty more, but somehow in a really fair way. Can you imagine my surprise when I started up Far Cry 2 with character selection, African outback, shops, and open world? The game was pretty good for what it was, but at the time the experience was ruined because I was so excited to play an updated Far Cry game, which was in my eyes old school difficulty and level based missions. When I found out the game was revolving around many different things and had an impossibly different aesthetic, I was pretty pissed. The first game had a tropical island, harsh difficulty, and aliens. Alien! The second game didn't seem to coincide with any of that at all. It didn't even make an attempt. I mean, look, it's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. It's got problems, but it's not overall a shamble. But its relevance to the name Far Cry seemed non-existent. It might seem a bit weird, but for me, it was like if Star Fox Adventures made all the changes that it did, then didn't involve Fox at all. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts did this as well. They got an adventure game and turned it into a build-your-own-car racer. There's no relevance in that. How did they even make that connection? I have no idea how they managed to get that past the production manager without him asking how the hell this is relevant to Banjo-Kazooie apart from Banjo. It's one of those things. It must have only made sense to the people that did it. Maybe they couldn't help it. I don't know. The point is, you can never artificially slap a connection onto another game through characters and titles and call it a sequel. That's just beyond everything bad. If you're going to do stuff like that, that's why you make a spin-off. Sequels are definitely not easy things to master, but from a design perspective, the way to make one not terrible isn't that difficult. As long as you know what makes a game horrible, you won't stuff anything up. It's just a matter of trying to not make the original game wish it wasn't related to the new one. There has to be a reason to have it be a sequel. There's a reason that the people behind Train Simulator didn't say it was a Mario game, and if you can't figure out why, well, then I just don't know anymore. It's always important, in my opinion, to have a good perception of knowing what to look for in a sequel, and knowing why it's bad. A good sequel will go off and fly into different places, exploring new ideas and concepts. A bad sequel that doesn't add anything, however, will try and put on the old clothes of its predecessor and trying to seduce people, trying to reclaim the glory that the original had. A sequel that's irrelevant, however, will be a strangely out-of-place animal that at face value says he's relevant, but in actual fact has a grotesque and horrible, formidable body of grossness. I really hope that elongated metaphor made sense. The point is, as long as this is recognized by many, I feel like it's more likely that series will be less and less frequently ruined. Oh, thanks for not closing the video. If you had any major issues with anything I said or how I said it, or you just want to vent some rage about something that happened in your life, leave a comment. And if you're feeling super duper generous and in an awesome mood, well, then maybe you could give me a like. You know, I'd do it.